Hi there, I am going to introduce you to some of the basic features in Adobe XD. I have just opened XD and I'm going to create a new document. When you begin working in XD, you will have the option to open any recent documents that you've been working on, or you'll be able to choose a new document. And there are several presets that are available to you, so if you wanted to make a phone-based size document, you could choose from the pull-down menu here, or if you wanted to make a web-based document, there are presets for web-based sizes, Instagram stories, or you could just choose a custom-sized interface. So I'm going to just choose to make a iPhone X size document. You can always change this, you're not married to the size, but it's good to start with something. When you choose one of the presets, your artboard is going to take on the name of that preset. You can easily rename the artboard by simply double clicking and renaming it whatever is appropriate. The artboard exists on the page, and that's where the visual portion of your page is going to reside. It is possible to have a document that has many artboards associated with it, depending on the complexity of your project. Once you have the artboard, you'll notice that XD is going to open. Your tools are going to appear along the left, and you don't have too many tools. The tool palette is somewhat minimal compared to some other applications. We'll get into some of these in just a moment. You do have this area which currently contains document assets. I have not created any document assets, so this is empty. And you can change this pane by clicking on these little icons down here. So this would switch me to my layer-based panel. This is going to switch me to any plugins that I may have installed. Or if we go back to the libraries, it'll show you any of your libraries. And currently I'm just using my document assets. So this is going to be items that I've saved that are particular to this document. You do have several tabs at the top: Design, Prototype, and Share. These allow you to do different sorts of actions based on what it is that you're trying to create in XD. We will primarily be working in the design section of the application right now, which is going to allow us to become familiar with how to lay out elements inside of XD. Over here is the property pane, and the property pane is an area of the application which will switch based on the tool that you have selected. So we will be using this quite often, and you will notice as we create the various elements, this area is going to change. XD application is an application that allows you to work with both vector and bitmap based artwork. So you can import images, you can import vector based drawings, and then you can create a bunch of stuff within XD. I'm going to be making a simple layout for a website, and I will be working with a variety of media. I'm going to go ahead and just paste in the artwork that I'll be using. I have a logo and I have just a hamburger based icon that I'm going to use for this demonstration. So we'll just keep these on the pasteboard portion of XD for right now. I'm going to start by using a rectangle. So I'm going to grab my rectangle tool and I'm going to come to the artboard and just click, hold, and drag to drag out a rectangle. When you draw out the rectangle, the option bar over here on the right is going to give you a bunch of information. So it'll give you the size of the element, the location of the element within the artboard, and then down below you can choose to change the fill color, change the border color, etc. So I'm going to turn off the border so I don't have a border, and I'm going to change the fill color to just kind of like a dark navy type blue. So I'm just going to get a dark blue, and that's the fill color that I want to use. And now that I have that there, I'm going to grab my logo and I'll drag my logo onto this area, and I'm going to grab my little hamburger icon and I'm going to put this over here as well. Now I want to make sure that my hamburger icon and my logo are lined up, so I'll select both those elements. I'll come over here to the right and I'm going to click this icon, which lines the vertical middles of these elements. And I'm going to select the hamburger icon, and I'll use my arrow keys to nudge this over. If you use Shift arrow, you'll move 10 pixels at a time, or just arrow key moves you 1 pixel at a time. So I'm going to place this over on the right. My logo will appear on the left. Now that I have that in place, I'm going to bring in an image that I want to use. I have some images and I've already saved the images. I have an image called whale shark header. I'm just going to simply grab this and drag this into the XD document and release. It's going to place this into my document, and I am going to scale this down so it takes up the same width as the artboard, and it proportionately scales by default. I'm going to take this image and I want to flip it. So I'm going to come over here to the toolbar and I'm going to use the flip horizontal to flip so that the image of the whale sharks is on the right, and then I have some open space over here on the left. Now, before I move on, I want to have a little bit of separation between the header section and the image. So I'm going to select the blue rectangle and we're going to create a drop shadow. I want the drop shadow to be white, so it's going to be more like a glow. And I'm going to increase the opacity of that. Now currently we don't see the drop shadow, and the reason why is because I placed the image after I created the rectangle. So what we need to do is we need to select the image of the whale shark, and we're going to need to use Object, Arrange, Send to Back. And now that it's in the back, you can see I have a little glow underneath this bar. So I'm going to select that, and we'll just kind of increase the amount of the glow a little bit by maybe making that 6. I'm going to make the blur a little bit less, maybe 4. And actually this is a little wide, so let me just reduce the width of that. And I'll have to grab my 2 elements, the logo and the hamburger icon, and I'm just going to shift nudge them up a little. And now I'll move up my image. So this is just a way to kind of separate these. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create some text. So I will use my text tool, and I'm simply going to click, and we're just going to write swim with whale sharks. I want to change the color of my text, so I'm going to highlight my text. I'll come here and change the fill color. So we'll just make this white. We can change the font. So the font that I'm going to use is going to be Lotto. And Lotto happens to have a bunch of different styles. So I'm going to use bold. And we're going to increase the size of this to maybe 30. So this text is going to be a little bit bigger. And I'll switch back to the arrow tool, the move tool, so that I can adjust the position. I also want to tighten up the spacing between these elements. So that is going to be right here, the leading. And if I have my text selected, I can just reduce the leading down a little bit like that. And we're going to create a button. So I'm going to use my rectangle tool again, and we'll just draw out a rectangle. When you create a rectangle inside of XD, I'm zooming in and I'm using the keyboard shortcut of Command+. When you create a rectangle, you'll notice you have these little circles inside the rectangle. They allow you to round the corners of the rectangle. If you want more precise rounding, you can come here to the property pane and you can adjust the amount of rounding. So I'm going to make the amount of rounding 8. I'm going to switch the border color to white, and I'm going to change the fill color to white, but I'm going to reduce it down to about 70%. So we'll kind of see through and see the background. Let's make that 80%, maybe a little bit more bright. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my text tool, and I'm just going to click, hold, and drag out a text box that is as wide as my rectangle. And we're just going to simply write learn more. Now my text is very large. It's taking on the same size as that headline text that I just wrote. So I'll highlight this. We'll reduce the size of this down to maybe 18. Let's change this to just be medium. And I'm going to change the color of this. And I have an eyedropper tool. If I come to my image right here, I can kind of sample a color from my document. I'm going to grab this blue from the logo. And we'll use the move tool again, and then let's actually make our text center aligned, and I'll just move this kind of up right here. And let's actually reduce this down a little bit. This button seems a little large for our purposes here, so there we go. And because my text is center aligned and the text box is the same width as the rectangle, they should automatically be centered, so that looks pretty good. Let's make this just a little thinner, and I'm just going to use my arrow keys to nudge down. I will select both of these items, the text and the rectangle, and I'm going to then move these up a little. And just to make selecting them easier, I'm going to group them together. So we'll use Object, Group, or Command or Control G is your keyboard shortcut to accomplish that. Wonderful. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make a couple of different sections that have some information about my page elements. So I will zoom out by using Command or Control minus to zoom out a little bit. I'm going to use my rectangle tool, and I will draw a rectangle. I'll change the fill color of the rectangle, and I'm going to immediately go to the eyedropper tool, and I'm just going to sample a kind of a turquoise shade from my image. That's a little dark, so I'll click on the color picker, and I'm just going to pick a little bit of a lighter variation of that shade. I do not want a border, so I will turn that off. And now I'm ready to create some text. So I will use my move tool, and I'm just going to select this headline. I'll hold down my Option key or Alt key, which allows me to make a copy. When I do so, the text disappears, and that is because it is now behind this rectangle. So I need to use Object, Arrange, Bring to Front, and we're going to change this text to say Conservation. You'll see when you position things in XD, you get these little kind of lines that appear. Those are guides, and they're really helpful because you can easily see when something is going to be centered or aligned with something else on the page, which is really great. I now want to create a block of text, and I will go grab a little bit of Lorem Ipsum text to populate into my text box. So let me go grab that real quick. All right, I have some Lorem Ipsum text in my clipboard. I will draw a text box, and then I'm just going to paste the text in. Now my text came in using the last size and color that was used. I will select all of the text by click, hold, and dragging, and I'm going to change the text color to white. I am going to change the alignment to left align. We'll change the weight to light, and I'm going to reduce the leading on this. So let's just make the leading 22. Looks pretty good. And I'm going to go ahead and check this little box right here, which allows me to create text that is a fixed size. When I do that, I can reduce the size of my text box, and it'll just eliminate the text that's showing. So I will do that. Let's switch back to our move tool. Let's move this up a little bit. And actually I want to make one more button under here, like a call to action. So I'm just going to increase the height of this turquoise background color, and I'll just select this entire element, and I'm just going to do an edit copy and edit paste. And now I have another button, so I'm just going to place this here, and we'll just put something like make a difference. And you can see my text wrapped. I don't want it to do that, so I'm just going to increase the width of this, and then I'll have to select the actual button itself. And since the text is right on top, it could be difficult to select the button. I'm going to double click so I can access the text or the button, and I'll just stretch this out a little bit, and let's make the M capital like so. That looks pretty good. These are still grouped because we had originally grouped the elements, and I'll drag them and just look for that little guide so that I can ensure that these things are centered. So that looks great. I'm just going to reduce the height of that a touch, and I will now select this whole section. I'm going to hold down my Option or Alt key, which is the keyboard shortcut, to make a copy, drag out a copy, and then we're just going to select the background color here. We'll change this to maybe like a kind of a gold shade, and I'm going to just change the headline here to say education. Now, because education is shorter, I'll need to click, hold, and drag and just adjust this so it center aligns. And I still have a bunch of text in here, so I'm going to just delete some of the original text. This isn't super necessary, but I'll just go ahead and do that so that it shows different text. And our button here will say something like "Be the change." All right. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add some pictures of some elements. Now, I need some more vertical space on my page. This page would be scrolling on a mobile device, so I'm just going to select the artboard, and once the artboard is selected, you can grab and extend down. Now you may see a little dotted line like is showing on my screen. This is where the first screen would essentially end for this size device. So if I was on an iPhone 10, I would see everything up until the dotted line, and then anything below the dotted line I would need to scroll to be able to see those elements. So that can be really helpful because it allows you to identify the above the fold area of your design, and you can ensure that you're putting all of the most important information above the fold. So that's a great little visual. All right, we are going to bring in an image. So once again, I have some images, and I'm just going to grab this bat ray image and drag it into my document. And we are going to go ahead and just set up a little kind of like collection of what we might want this particular element to say, what we want it to display as. So I do want to show the image, and then underneath the image, and actually let's scale this down just a little bit. So I'm going to grab from the corner. It proportionately resizes by default. If you're trying to make it a specific size and you know what that size is, you can actually plug in a numeric value here, or as you click, hold, and drag, you can watch this value so that you can resize it to a specific size. The next thing that I'm going to do is we're going to go ahead and make kind of like a little card, I guess, like a web card that is going to talk about like what this creature is and where it's located, and then we'll put a button, like a call to action, where you could learn more. So I'm going to draw a rectangle. I'll have no fill, but we do want to have a very light stroke, so I'm going to just change that to a super light gray. And then I'm going to use my type tool. I will click, hold, and drag to drag out a type box. And we're going to go ahead and write bat ray, which is the name. I'm going to highlight this element, and we'll change the fill color. And let's use our eyedropper and grab this dark blue from the top. And I'm going to make my text bold, and I'm going to make it center aligned. And let's change the size to 24. So this is going to be a bit larger. And I'll just kind of adjust the position of this up a little bit. Then I'm going to go ahead and Option or Alt, click, hold, and drag out a copy. We're going to write San Diego, which is the location. This text is going to be smaller, so I'm going to highlight this text. We'll reduce the size down to maybe 16. I'm going to change the weight of the font to just be light. And then we are going to grab our button. We're going to drag out a copy. And I want to change some of the attributes about the button. So first of all, I'm going to select the text right here, and we'll write more. And then I'm going to put a little angle bracket. I want to reduce the spacing between these two elements, so I'm going to highlight them. And if we come right in here, we can adjust the character spacing. So I want to use negative numbers there. Let's just try -100, and that'll just kind of tighten up the spacing, which is what I want. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to double click on this, and I need to select not only the text but the actual button itself. So I'm going to select the button. The button is now selected, and I'm going to change my fill color. So let's use our eyedropper and sample this teal. And we have the border at white, which is fine. I'm going to reduce the size of this down a little bit, and I'm going to select this more text, and we'll make this text white. And let's reduce the size of that down as well. If you want to edit anything that's grouped, you have to double click on the element to be able to have access to the individual components. But now that this is kind of built the way I want, I'm just going to drag this and place it right here. And my little box is a little too long, so I'll shorten that up a little bit. And let's just select all of these things, and I'm going to use my horizontal align, so everything is aligned like so. And now I have this kind of like little web card based element. So I'm going to select this element and I'm going to group it, object, group. And what I want to do is I want to create several of these. So I could copy paste and paste in multiple elements, but in Adobe XD we have something called the repeat grid. Repeat grid allows you to take a set of objects, and once you turn it into a repeat grid element, you can drag out and make copies of the element. So if I drag out horizontally, it'll tile multiple copies horizontally, or if I drag down, I can make multiple copies down. So I'm going to make 8 of these little cards. So I'm going to have them appear on my mobile in a 2-up, and then they'll just stack on top of each other. And I can adjust the position of these elements by just using my arrow keys or click, hold, and dragging. If you want to adjust the spacing, if you place your mouse between the elements, you'll see a little pink bar, and this is going to allow you to increase or decrease the spacing. So we can dial that in to be whatever size we want. I'll just I'm looking at the little overlays, and I'm going to set it to be 14. And then once I've done that, I'm going to select the entire repeat grid element and just kind of nudge it over a little bit so that these are optically centered. Now you can see that the ones at the bottom are being cut off, and that's because my artboard isn't quite long enough. So once again, I'm going to select the name of the artboard, drag down to increase the size of the artboard. And just finally, I'm going to select this rectangle at the top. I'm going to Option or Alt, click, hold, and drag out a copy. This is just simply going to be our footer, and I'll just have my document end at the bottom right there. So we'll kind of zoom into this area, and let's use our text tool. And I'm just going to write Mar, and we'll write copyright 2021. My text is a little tight, so I'm going to come here and just make sure that the character spacing is set back to 0. We'll reduce the size of this down to about 10, and I'm going to use light italic for the font styling, and then I'll just kind of place this in the middle of the area. So if I click Command or Control 0, that's going to allow everything to display on the page, and now I have everything appearing on the page. Now this is looking okay, except that these are the same exact information. XD has this really amazing ability of allowing you to substitute in additional content. So I'm going to open my document that has the other images, and I've already created 8 images that are the appropriate size. I'm going to select those, and I'm simply going to drag them onto the picture area of XD. And you can see that I have a little 8, and when I release my mouse, it's going to populate each of these grid elements with its own unique picture, which is pretty magical. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to substitute the text. So it has the name of whatever these sea creatures are. And if we go back out to the folder I have here, I have created some text files. So I have something called Sea Life Titles. This is simply a text document that just has the names of all of the creatures. So bat ray, dolphins, electric ray, fish, etc. I'm going to select this text file and I'm going to drag it to the name. You can see that when I highlight over the titles, they kind of get a blue background. So I'm going to highlight over the first bat ray title, and when I release, everything is populated with the appropriate name. Now, one of my names is a little long, so we'll have to adjust that. But before we do that, I have another document that has all of the location names. So I'm going to select that and drag it to the location tab right here. And you can see it's highlighting in blue. And when I release, that is going to update. So this is really such a great addition because you don't have to type all this stuff in. You just have a text document and you can just bring the information in, which is pretty awesome. The giant black sea bass title is a little long. I'm going to select the first bit of text here, and we are going to reduce the font size down. And as you see, as I reduce the font size down, all of the text is being reduced down. So I'm going to change that to about 18 so that this will fit in. I'm going to select the name of the location and the button, and I'm just going to nudge them up a little bit. And you can see like all of the other elements are updating. So when I make these changes, all of the repeat grid elements are benefiting from these changes. So any change you make is going to update, which is so cool. And there you have it. I have a quick mobile mock-up of a web page that I might be interested in making, and I can really put this together pretty quickly. I can try different things, and XD makes it really easy for me to be able to do this. Before I complete this lecture, I want to show you one more thing, and that is that we can store all of the various choices that we made in regards to text sizing, colors, etc. If I select the artboard and I come over here to the document assets, I can go ahead and have the document assets populate in all of these areas. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just right click on the name of the artboard, and I'm going to choose add color to assets, and it's going to add all of the colors that I used in the document, all of the hex values, every single element that I used is going to be added. I'm going to right click again and say add character styles to assets. That's going to add all of the text based styles that I used. So everything is stored. The benefit of that is that if I continue to build on this and want to copy one of these styles to something else, for instance, if I write some text, it's going to take on the properties of whatever text style I used previously. So if I want this to be the Lato 30-point bold, I simply select this text box and I click on this style, and it's going to apply that style. I don't have to remember I used bold, I used 30-point, whatever it is. So this is really handy. And in addition to adding colors and characters, you can actually add components, which are grouped selections of items, pictures, whatever else you might be creating. And you can store these in the library as well. So if I select my logo and I click plus, now I have a logo component. And then if I want to use this at some later point, I can drag it out of the library and there it is. So this is just a quick overview of Adobe XD, but hopefully you will find this useful in getting up and running using Adobe XD.